The Galactic Academic Council had gathered once more. Today's agenda, however, was not focused on the usual topics of trade routes or military alliances. No, today they were discussing humanity. It had only been a few short decades since humans had been formally inducted into the Galactic Collective. Their homeworld, Earth, a death world by galactic classification, had bred a species that was tough, unpredictable, and by most accounts, strangely resilient. But there was more to them than just their biology. Despite originating from a planet that seemed hostile to intelligent life, humans had made remarkable strides in technology and science. And now, the collective's leading scholars wanted to understand how. "I find it curious," a Zerthian mathematician began, addressing the room filled with alien intellects. "The humans' technology appears crude on the surface. Their computers lack the efficiency of our systems, yet they have managed to outmaneuver us in certain technical fields." A murmur spread throughout the council. This was not news, but it was an uncomfortable truth for some. Humans, despite their relatively primitive status, had contributed to multiple fields in the short time since joining the collective. Their methods were unorthodox, to say the least, often relying on brute force rather than elegance. But somehow, their solutions worked. One of the Gherkin engineers, known for his precise mind, clicked his mandibles. "Perhaps it is a matter of novelty. They are not bound by the same rigid logic that we are accustomed to. Their chaos, while inefficient, seems effective." This intrigued the council further. Human adaptability had been a subject of study for years. While most advanced civilizations in the galaxy relied on streamlined, predictable computational systems, humans had an almost reckless approach to problem solving. They didn't seem to care about efficiency as much as they cared about results. Another scholar, a tall, luminous Orathan, projected an image into the center of the room. "A human engineering problem. This," she said, "is an assignment given to a second-year human student. Fluid dynamics, they call it. It's basic by our standards, and yet they solve it with a peculiar blend of intuition and brute force calculation." The council observed the problem. To them, it looked simple, something their supercomputers could handle in nanoseconds. But the Orathan continued, "Their approach to these problems defies our linear thinking. Their chaotic variables and unconventional use of computational power could provide us with insights into alternative methods." This statement was met with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Humans were known to be chaotic thinkers, true. But was that chaos something to be admired? Many of the scholars believed humans to be an anomaly, useful perhaps, but not something to be taken too seriously. They had yet to truly understand the scope of what human minds could achieve. "We should test it," a Sothari scientist suggested. "Feed this assignment into our supercomputers and analyze how they would solve it. Perhaps we can isolate the patterns in their thought process." The idea was met with general approval. What better way to understand human intellect than to pit their solutions against the most advanced computational systems in the galaxy? The assignment, though trivial in nature, would be an ideal starting point for a larger study on human cognitive functions. Yet, beneath the approval was a hint of arrogance. None of the scholars believed the human problem could pose any real challenge to their systems. After all, the collective supercomputers had been designed to handle the most complex calculations known to the galaxy. A simple engineering homework, even from a Deathworlder, would hardly be a threat. As they prepared the data for analysis, one of the younger scholars, a Dronian known for her meticulous nature, hesitated. "We must be cautious," she warned. "Humans are not like us. Their way of thinking is not bound by the same rules. We cannot predict how their chaos will interact with our systems." The room fell silent for a moment before another scholar chuckled lightly. "It's just homework," he said dismissively. "What could possibly go wrong?" The human assignment was fed into the first alien supercomputer. A simple task, they thought. Just another human curiosity to analyze and dissect. The fluid dynamics problem should have been solved in mere seconds. As the system began its calculations, the scholars waited patiently, fully expecting a quick result. But seconds passed, then minutes. Still, no result appeared. At first, the team assumed a minor delay, a quirk in the data transfer perhaps. They glanced at one another, exchanging puzzled looks. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Gherkin engineer ran a diagnostic, his antennae twitching with mild annoyance. "It's just slow," he muttered. But as the calculations continued to run, something became very clear. The problem wasn't slow. It was stuck. The supercomputer's logic circuits were looping, caught in a chaotic swirl of calculations that defied its usual processes. The human's method of solving the problem, full of chaotic, interdependent variables, was confounding the system. Instead of breaking the task into neat, solvable pieces, the assignment was forcing the computer to consider thousands of variables simultaneously, each one interacting with the others in unpredictable ways. Chaos theory, fluid dynamics, and brute force computation, elements that made sense to a human mind, were overwhelming the machine. The diagnostic alarms began to sound. Heat levels in the processing cores were rising. Logic errors were multiplying. Before anyone could react, the first failure occurred. The supercomputer's circuits shorted out, and the entire system crashed. Panic rippled through the room. It was impossible. How could such a basic problem cause this? The Scola. Aris waited patiently, fully expecting a quick result. But seconds passed. Then minutes. Still, no result appeared. At first, the team assumed a minor delay, a quirk in the data transfer, perhaps. They glanced at one another, exchanging puzzled looks. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Gherkin engineer ran a diagnostic, his antennae twitching with mild annoyance. "It's just slow," he muttered. But as the calculations continued to run, something became very clear. The problem wasn't slow. It was stuck. The supercomputer's logic circuits were looping, caught in a chaotic swirl of calculations that defied its usual processes. The human's method of solving the problem, full of chaotic, interdependent variables, was confounding the system. Instead of breaking the task into neat, solvable pieces, the assignment was forcing the computer to consider thousands of variables simultaneously, each one interacting with the others in unpredictable ways. Chaos theory, fluid dynamics, and brute force computation, elements that made sense to a human mind, were overwhelming the machine. The diagnostic alarms began to sound. Heat levels in the processing cores were rising. Logic errors were multiplying. Before anyone could react, the first failure occurred. The supercomputer's circuits shorted out, and the entire system crashed. Panic rippled through the room. It was impossible. How could such a basic problem cause this? The scholars were baffled. The Gherkin engineer stared at the dead console, unable to process what had just happened. "That shouldn't be possible," he said quietly. "It's just a homework assignment." But the evidence was clear. The machine had been unable to cope with the complexity hidden beneath the surface of the human method. Still, they couldn't accept that this was anything more than a fluke. "There must have been an error in the data input," one of them suggested. Another chimed in, "Try a different system. This one must have been faulty." They quickly rerouted the assignment to another supercomputer, a more advanced model. This time, they carefully checked the input, ensuring there were no transmission errors. Confident that the previous failure had been an anomaly, they watched as the second machine began processing the problem. But the results were eerily familiar. Once again, the chaotic nature of the human solution caused the system to spiral out of control. Processing times skyrocketed. The supercomputer's components began to strain under the unexpected load. Error messages flashed across the screens, warnings of computational overload. The scholars' unease deepened. What had begun as a casual study of human intellect was quickly spiraling into a disaster. The second system failed, crashing just like the first. By now, the room was filled with tension. They had not anticipated this. The human assignment was proving far more complex than they had expected. But what was worse was that they still didn't understand why. The scholars, so certain of their technological superiority, were now scrambling to make sense of the failures. Each time they tried to analyze the data, the chaos within the human problem eluded them. Desperation began to creep into their actions. More systems were brought online, each one tasked with processing the assignment. But the pattern repeated. Calculations looped endlessly, systems overheated. One by one, the supercomputers began to fail. Panic set in. What had started as a trivial academic exercise was rapidly becoming a full-blown crisis. The technological backbone of their research station was collapsing under the weight of a human engineering problem, a mere homework assignment. By now, Half of the station's computational resources were either offline or dangerously close to crashing. The scholars couldn't deny it any longer. Something was fundamentally wrong. This wasn't just a case of human ingenuity. The human assignment was wreaking havoc on their systems in ways they hadn't thought possible. What they had initially viewed as a simple, straightforward task had turned into a technological nightmare. Fear was beginning to replace arrogance. As they looked at the remaining systems still online, they realized they were running out of options. The complexity of human logic was something they had never prepared for. And now, they were paying the price. The reports started pouring in from across the galactic network. It wasn't just the research station anymore. Supercomputers in multiple systems were experiencing similar failures. Entire networks had gone offline, processing clusters were shutting down, and logic errors were cascading through the core systems of some of the galaxy's most advanced technological hubs. Panic set in quickly. What began as a scientific curiosity had spiraled into a full-scale crisis. The Galactic Collective's communication channels buzzed with urgent messages from various planetary governments. The leading powers, Zerthians, Orithans, Gherkins, began mobilizing their cyber defense divisions. Fingers were pointed, accusations muttered behind closed doors, but one name was at the center of all the discussions: humans. It seemed too coincidental that every system had failed right after attempting to process their homework. What had been a simple academic study now looked suspiciously like sabotage. Alien leaders held emergency conferences, scrambling for answers. Many of them had been wary of humanity from the start. Earth, after all, was a death world, producing a species that had thrived in conditions deemed lethal by most standards. Humans had always been an unknown variable, unpredictable in their approach to everything from politics to warfare. Now, it seemed their intellect was just as dangerous. "This cannot be an accident," one Zerthian high official declared during an emergency broadcast. "Their assignment may be hiding advanced subversive algorithms, something our systems are incapable of detecting." The theory gained traction quickly. In the absence of a better explanation, paranoia spread like wildfire. It wasn't just a technical glitch anymore, it was potential warfare. A digital attack cleverly disguised as innocent homework. Meanwhile, alien security agencies ramped up their investigations. Cybersecurity experts combed through the remains of the supercomputers, trying to find any trace of malicious code. But what they found instead was chaos. No viruses, no backdoors, just an impossibly complex series of equations and unpredictable variables that their systems had never been designed to handle. Yet that only deepened the suspicion. Could humans have developed a form of digital weaponry so sophisticated that it mimicked chaos itself? Not everyone agreed. Some factions within the collective urged caution. The Orithan delegation argued that it could simply be a misunderstanding. "Humans are unconventional thinkers," they said. "They don't follow the same logical patterns we do. Their chaotic approach to problem-solving might simply overwhelm our structured systems." But their voices were drowned out by the growing calls for immediate action. In the midst of this, formal accusations were made. The Gherkan Military Council filed an official charge against the human delegation, accusing them of using academic studies as a front for a massive cyber attack. Diplomatic protocols were activated, and a full investigation was ordered. The once amicable, if cautious, relationship between humanity and the collective was now hanging by a thread. On Earth, news of the crisis reached human leadership quickly, but the response was confusion. The idea that a student's fluid dynamics homework had triggered a galactic meltdown was incomprehensible to them. Yet the accusations were serious. Diplomatic envoys were immediately dispatched to collective headquarters, trying to calm the situation. But the more humans tried to explain that there was no malicious intent, the more suspicious it looked to the alien leadership. Human diplomats sat across from alien counterparts, bewildered by the gravity of the accusations. "It's just homework," one diplomat insisted. "Our students deal with this kind of stuff all the time." But to the aliens, this only confirmed their worst fears. How could something so destructive be considered normal by human standards? The sheer unpredictability of human intellect was now seen as a threat to galactic security. Behind closed doors, human officials scrambled to get a better understanding of what had happened. Scientists and engineers reviewed the original assignment, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was complex, sure, but it was a standard engineering problem. Yet the damage was undeniable. Supercomputers across the galaxy were fried, and entire networks had collapsed, all because of a piece of human homework. As the investigation unfolded, tension between humans and the rest of the collective grew. Some alien factions began quietly preparing for conflict, unsure of whether humanity's unpredictability was a sign of dangerous potential or just chaotic brilliance. What had started as a simple misunderstanding was rapidly escalating into a full-blown diplomatic crisis. Trust, once fragile, was now almost non-existent. Every human attempt to explain their side of the story only deepened the suspicion. In the eyes of many aliens, the humans had shown their hand. Whether they knew it or not, their chaotic nature had the potential to destabilize the entire galaxy. The question wasn't just how to fix the current crisis, but whether humanity could be trusted at all moving forward. The galaxy was on edge. What was once a trivial academic exercise had exposed something far deeper. The fear that perhaps, despite all their technological superiority, the alien species of the galactic collective had severely underestimated humanity's true potential. And now, they weren't sure if they could control it. The investigation dragged on for weeks, with teams of alien engineers dissecting the human homework assignment and the shattered remains of their supercomputers. Every fragment of data was examined, analyzed, and cross-checked. The urgency of the situation drove the finest minds in the galaxy to work around the clock, each hoping to uncover some hidden malicious code. Some indication that the humans had intentionally sabotaged their systems. But no matter how deep they dug, they found nothing. The assignment was exactly what it appeared to be. A standard engineering problem. No malware, no hidden algorithms, just a brutally complex series of fluid dynamics calculations. The problem, it seemed, wasn't the humans. It was the way alien technology had tried to process their chaotic methods. In the end, a breakthrough came not from the alien engineers, but from a group of human scientists sent as part of the diplomatic delegation. After days of explaining their educational system and technical methodologies, they finally pinpointed the issue. One of the human engineers, a grizzled veteran of Earth space programs, spoke in a private meeting with the alien scholars. "Your systems," he said, gesturing to the rows of darkened supercomputers, "are designed for precision. They follow strict logic, optimized to process data in the most efficient, orderly way possible. But humans, well, we don't think like that." The room fell silent, the alien scholars waiting for the explanation. The human continued, "When we solve problems, we don't just consider the expected outcomes. We assume something will go wrong, variables we can't predict. So, we throw a lot of ideas at the wall, some chaotic, some contradictory, hoping that one will stick. We're messy, and we're not afraid to be. Our methods are designed to deal with unpredictability, with complexity that your systems don't account for." The alien scholars exchanged glances. Their systems were indeed designed to be efficient, logical, streamlined. Chaos was anathema to their technology. Unpredictable variables were isolated and eliminated, not integrated into their processing. The humans, by contrast, embraced chaos, turning it into a tool for problem-solving. It wasn't that their homework had been malicious. It was that it had introduced more layers of complexity than the rigid, orderly supercomputers could handle. The aliens didn't want to believe it at first. Their systems, the pinnacle of technological achievement in the galaxy, had been brought down not by an enemy, but by sheer human unpredictability. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The systems had failed because they couldn't process the multi-dimensional logic that the humans took for granted. Reluctantly, the head of the investigation, a Zerthian technocrat known for his exacting standards, addressed the council. "There is no sabotage," he admitted, his tone heavy with frustration. "The failure was caused by our own technological limitations. Human problem-solving, while chaotic, is not malicious. It's simply incompatible with our systems as they currently stand." The tension in the room deflated slightly, but the atmosphere remained uneasy. This wasn't the conclusion anyone had expected. Humanity, once thought of as a relatively primitive species, had exposed a flaw in the galaxy's most advanced technology. It wasn't their intent to do so, but the result was the same. The galactic powers were now faced with the uncomfortable truth that their systems weren't as infallible as they had believed. Human diplomats and engineers worked tirelessly to ease the tensions. They explained how their systems had been built around adaptability, flexibility, and the assumption that no problem could be approached with a one-size-fits-all solution. Their methods were messy, yes, but they were effective in ways that rigid logic couldn't be. As the investigation drew to a close, the Alien Council members convened for a final meeting. The question on everyone's mind was simple. What does this mean for the future? The humans hadn't intended to cause harm, but the event had highlighted just how dangerous their unpredictable thinking could be. Some argued for stricter oversight of human technological contributions, fearful of the unknown variables their methods might introduce. Others saw a different potential. If humanity's chaotic brilliance could be harnessed, they might become invaluable allies in areas where alien logic had failed. "We cannot control them," the Gherkin representative said, his mandibles clicking in thought. "But perhaps we should not try. Their unpredictability is their strength. We must learn to work with it, rather than against it." There was no clear consensus. The collective was divided, torn between fear of what humanity might unleash next, and a growing respect for their unique capabilities. What was clear, though, was that humanity could no longer be dismissed as a primitive or insignificant species. Their unpredictability, their willingness to embrace chaos, gave them a power that no one had anticipated. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, the head of the human engineering team shared a final thought with the council. "You have your ways," he said, smiling slightly, "and we have ours. Maybe together, we can cover the blind spots we couldn't see alone." The collective leaders pondered these words long after the humans had left. Their technology was more advanced, their logic more refined, but in humanity, they had encountered something they couldn't quantify or control. Adaptability, in its rawest form. It was both a gift and a danger, and the galaxy would have to adjust to the presence of this unpredictable species in their midst. The incident had ended, but the aftershocks would be felt for a long time. Humanity's chaotic genius had made its mark, and the galaxy would never view them the same way again.